June 7, 1944. Off Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. The channel heaves in long grey swells. Smoke lies in veils over the bluffs. Aboard USS Augusta CA-31, flagship of Admiral Alan G. Kirk's Western Naval Task Force Lieutenant General Omar N. Bradley steadies binoculars on the bridge wing and watches a crooked file of aged freighters and Liberty hulls creep toward the surf-under tug escort. Whistles. Flag hoists. Then the flat command over voice radio open sea cocks. Set fuses. Stand by to scuttle. This is Gooseberry 2, the blockship breakwater for Omaha, an artificial lee forced into being under fire. The German premise had been simple. Without a captured deep-water port, an invasion would starve itself on the beach. 7th Army under Colonel General Friedrich Dollmann built its defense on that assumption with 352. Infanterie Division under General Lieutenant Dietrich Race, anchoring the Omaha sector with MG 42 seconds, 75 mm, PAC 40 seconds, 88 mm, dual-purpose guns, and the tubes of Artillery Regiment, 352, 105 mm, Lee FH 18, and 150 mm SFH 18, backed by pre-sighted mortar zones and beach obstacles. But as the tide rises on D+1, the Allied answer takes shape in steel and concrete. Ship by ship, the Americans sink a wall. A hull slumps decks awash, another slews broadside as compartments flood. Masts can't, rigging snaps, and then the sea behind them lies measurably flatter. LCVPs and LCTs dart into the slack water and find purchase. The concept is British hammered out under Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, with civilian engineers and Royal Navy constructors, Phoenix concrete caissons, Whale floating roadways designed by Alan Beckett, Spud pierheads with telescoping legs, Beetle pontoon floats, and first the Gooseberry shelter line of blockships. The execution here falls to the Americans. Navy beachmasters of the 6th and 7th Naval Beach Battalions ride small craft to bully traffic into lanes. Tugs and salvage vessels jockey hulls onto precise bearings. Demolition teams blow charges to settle draft. Signalmen snap Aldis lamps in the spray. On shore, the 1st and 5th Engineer Special Brigades push DUKWs up the shingle bulldozers, bite into the dune line, and dozer blades throw sparks against Czech hedgehogs and rails. Gunfire never fully quits. A German battery beyond Collierville coughs a string of shells that march through the anchorage. A near-miss thumps a tug's plates and showers the deck with brine. USS Texas BB-35 and USS Arkansas BB-33 answer with 14-inch and 12-inch salvos into the suspected positions. Destroyers like USS Satterlee DD, 626, and USS McCook DD, 496, edge dangerously close to rake embrasures with 5-inch 38 fire. Farther out, Augusta's 8-inch guns brood silent while her radios stay hot, feeding a single metric. Bradley cares about now tons per tide, vehicles per hour, the arithmetic that turns a beach into a foothold. Mark the time, a petty officer says as another hulk settles. The deck log will show it D+1 Omaha Gooseberry established. In the lee Navy pontoon causeway kits, crack open like carpenter chests. Sections pin together, dogs clank, bolts slam home. A floating lane inches toward the surf line where seabees with lifebelts and wrenches wait waist-deep to catch the next panel. A British motor launch dances in the chop, flag wagging minute corrections to a U.S. tug easing a final blockship into the gap. Then the order flood her. Pumps roar. Men drop to ladders, scramble into boats, and the ship slumps to her mark's decks, hissing as the cold sea climbs. Over the eastern horizon, the tall backs of the first Phoenix caissons for Mulberry arise out of the haze under tow from fleets of tugs. Each caisson is a hollow concrete giant, with flooding valves and mooring points to be planted in a planned grid and linked by hinged whale roadways to spud pierheads that ride the tide on jackable legs. This is the harbour that the German staff said could not exist without Cherbourg. It is literally arriving piece by piece. On the sand, a traffic sergeant from 1st Engineer Special Brigade waves an LCT in with frantic chopping arms. The ramp slams, and a pair of 2.5-ton trucks cough to life and grind up the new exit lane. An ammunition detail wrestles crates of 30 to 06 and 105 millimeters, rounds off a DUKW, faces tense movements automatic. The air smells of wet rope, diesel, cordite and rust. A wrecked Sherman sits half buried at the high water mark, its 75 millimeters gun at a helpless angle, but behind it, the inland draws are being cut open with grader blades and explosive line charges to make room for more traffic. Procedure over theatre. The script that held yesterday begins to crack. Through his glasses, Bradley finds the bluffs again. Smoke. Occasional dust puffs where counter-battery strikes land. He lowers them and turns to a staff colonel calling out numbers from a clipboard. The targets are brutal in their simplicity. Thousands of tons per day sustained across an open beach, regardless of weather, until Cherbourg falls and the railheads roll forward. The Western Naval Task Force signal net ticks with rendezvous points, tug assignments and timing for tonight's convoy. No speeches, no flourish, just line items, Phoenix arrivals, whale sections assembled, Spud pierheads rigged, Gooseberry gaps closed. A German 150mm shell crashes short and geysers a curtain of spray that hammers the Augusta's superstructure. Men flinch, recover, resume their work. The line of dead ships holds. The water behind them stays calm enough for a boat crew to pass a line by hand. The harbour is not yet a harbour, but in the physics that rules wind and fetch and breaking waves, the battle is already tilting. Build shelter, build piers, drive tonnage. The invasion has brought its port with it, and tonight more of it will arrive in tow. June 8th, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. Morning wind out of the west, long swell on the quarter. The first Phoenix concrete caisson looms out of haze behind a pair of Royal Navy rescue tug service ships from the Empire-class tow wires humming under strain. On the bridge of USS Augusta, Admiral Alan Goodrich Kirk's staff pass bearings to the American Beachmasters. A Royal Navy motor launch flashes flag signals in crisp bursts. The concrete giant answers the helm like a stubborn building. It cares only for alignment to a chalked grid held in grease pencil on plotting boards and in the minds of the men waving paddles from pitching boats. A United States Navy auxiliary tug crosses the Phoenix's bow and takes the lead. A salvage vessel eases along the stern to act as a brake. United States Naval Construction Battalions shout valve orders over a loudhailer. Flood to port. Hold to starboard. Keep her head 2 points north. The caisson begins to settle slow at first, then with purpose, as seawater climbs the internal cells. A British petty officer on the motor launch jabs a signal toward a coloured buoy that marks the lane. Correct to the left. Hold. The Phoenix kisses bottom with a deep shudder that travels through the boats like a struck rail. Lines are slipped. Tug captains spin their wheels and open throttles backing clear. Minutes later, a second caisson noses in oil-stained bow wave, folding against the first. The grid becomes a pattern, measured gaps and mooring points presented like sockets. Astern, a lighter stacked with whale floating roadway sections, waits its cue. Designed by British engineer Alan Beckett, each whale span is a steel open truss with hinged ends that will ride on Beetle pontoon floats. The floats are already being shoved into position by amphibious trucks and small craftmen, straddling them with wrench pouches clipped to web belts. Bolts rattle into place. Dogs clamp home. The sea tries to tear it all apart. The geometry refuses. German batteries inland probe the roadstead, with scattered shells that throw up white geysers between ships. American destroyers edge in again and lay 5-inch 38 caliber fire across suspected gun lines, while Army liaison aircraft weave above the smoke to correct. High in the haze, a few German fighters test the edge and turn away when Royal Air Force patrols appear. The real enemy is wave fetch. Every minute the Phoenix line grows wave height inside drops a fraction. Every fraction is one more landing ship tank getting a clean approach, one more causeway panel pinned without tearing a man's hands. Farther east at Arromanches, British engineers repeat the same ballet for the second artificial harbour under the cover of Gooseberry breakwaters off Gold Beach. The two harbours are siblings, one in American hands at Omaha, one in British hands at Arromanches, both under the orchestration of Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay's Naval Expeditionary Force. Signal nets crackle from ship to ship and beach to beach, passing tug assignments tow estimated times of arrival, and the order in which spud pierheads will stand up. A spud is a pierhead on telescoping legs that jack down to the seabed, allowing the platform to ride the tide while staying steady enough to take heavy loads. Crews rig the first spud under a hiss of spray. Hydraulic pumps groan. The legs find bottom. The deck steadies. There is a quick cheer, then hands return to work. Onshore, the 1st Engineer Special Brigade and the 5th Engineer Special Brigade turn beach chaos into lanes and dumps. Traffic control points appear from nothing, hand-painted signs nailed to posts, military police with paddles, bulldozers pushing spoil into revetments. A detail from the 6th Naval Beach Battalion lays out coloured panels for landing ship tank rendezvous positions. A platoon from a quartermaster truck company backs 2.5 ton cargo trucks down the first pontoon causeway built in the shelter of Gooseberry. 2 engines coughing drivers white-knuckled as the decking shifts under the tyres. The ramp man drops his arm. Go. Aboard USS Augusta, Lieutenant General Omar Nelson Bradley listens, while a staff officer reads the noon tallies. Vehicles ashore. Tons of ammunition. Tons of petroleum oil and lubricants. Casualty evacuations back to transports and landing ship tank. Numbers tick upward with every tide. He nods once and turns back to the glass. Another Phoenix is settling bow just awash, deck rails cutting the chop into regular lines. The water inside the growing arc looks different, now streaked and manageable instead of random and mean. That difference is the point. It is the gap between a boat crew fighting every breaking crest and a boat crew passing a line by hand. Toward evening, a convoy of landing ship tank noses in. Their paint is scabbed by shrapnel, ramps are kinked and repaired with fish plates. Under the new lee, a landing ship tank sidles against a floating roadway with only gentle slaps of water along the plates. The ramp drops. A Sherman medium tank grinds onto steel panels that flex but hold. Chains clink. Guides with batons walk the driver forward under short, clipped words. Moments later, the tank is on the beach tracks, chewing into sand. A second tank follows, then a Caterpillar bulldozer with a welded snorkel stack, then a line of trucks heavy with boxed rations and 105mm shells. Procedure over theatre. Night comes fast. Blackout rules. Tugs rig shaded towing lights. Motor launches pass with muffled engines. The grid still needs caissons, and the piers still need legs. Crews work by hand lamps and by feel. A Seabee sits on a Beetle float and tightens a nut by touch, passing the wrench to the next man without a word. Offshore, a Royal Navy corvette turns slow circles echo, ranging as a hedge against a late motor torpedo boat. An army chaplain rides a small boat back to a transport, with the last litter cases of the watchhead bowed coat soaked with spray. Just before midnight, a low black wall rises to the northwest. Barometers creep down on warship bridges from Omaha to Arromanches. The English Channel is changing. Signals go out to double moorings and rig storm lines across the half-finished spans. On the beach, engineers lash causeway joints and lay extra anchors. In the anchorage, tug captains study tow plans, and then the sky. The work does not pause. It bends to the weather that is coming. June 19th, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. The western horizon turns the colour of gunmetal and keeps darkening. Wind backs into the northwest and begins to climb. Barometers fall on every bridge from the Gooseberry line to the transport area. By noon, the channel is a set of iron rails, each swell longer, higher, heavier. Tugs lean on their lines until spray rips past the wheelhouses. The Phoenix caissons moan as new load finds old concrete. Beyond them, the floating breakwaters, Bombardon cruciform steel floats chained into great belts, heave, yaw, and start to snatch at their moorings. On the unfinished American harbour, the first failure is heard before it is seen, a deep metallic crack under the wind. A Bombardon shudders out of line chain cables part, and the float swings broadside and hammers the next unit. One break becomes two become a gap. The gap lets the full fetch inside the works. Whale roadway spans twist under torsion they were not meant to feel. Beetle pontoons climb and slam down, pins shear, bolts ping into the spray. On a spud pierhead, a crewman braces at a stanchion as the deck rides the tide on telescoping legs, the platform steady enough to work, but the approaches turning into knives of water. He keeps the line on his shoulder until it burns his palm and lets it go. Destroyers try to stand by the most endangered pieces, making sternway to keep station and throwing heaving lines where they can. It is no use. The wind is too hard and the sea has too much room to run. In the lee of Gooseberry, 2 LCT skippers fight to hold bows square to the surf, while beachmasters in cork life jackets bellow orders into loudhailers that vanish in the roar. A pontoon causeway section tears free rises like a breaching animal and cartwheels toward the shallows. Seabees hook it with lines and ride it until the next breaker rips them off their feet. On Augusta, the charts are weighted against the table and the signal bridge is rimed in salt, men blinking into spray to catch flags that are there and then not there at all. Through the night of June 19th into June 20th, the gale builds. Reports pass in clipped voice over crowded nets. 1 Phoenix shifted 6 feet, 1 Bombardon adrift, 1 spud leg bent. Then, worse, a pierhead lost. By dawn, the American artificial harbour is a geometry coming apart in slow motion. The Gooseberry breakwater of blockships still knocks the worst of the sea down, but the floating outer belt that was meant to tame the long swell has been torn open. Landing ship tank that had crept in under the new lee now turn away rather than risk being pinned broadside against a broken runway span. An LST grounded on purpose at the right state of tide is safer than steel that moves unpredictably underfoot. At Arromanches, the story is hard but not ruin. The British harbour rides lower in the lee of the coast, its Bombardon belts holding more of their shape. Royal Engineers and Royal Navy parties lash fresh lines across stressed joints, jack spud legs, and swap damaged Beetles under the ends of whale spans. Even there it is touch and go. Caissons pound, deck plates groan. A single parted cable can snake the length of a pier and fell a man. Yet as the day turns, the line at Arromanches is still a line. Trucks still grind off, landing ship, tank noses dipping as decks lift and fall and climb the ramps onto the shingle. June 21st. The wind begins to ease, but the swell lingers long. Trains still running in from the Atlantic. Survey boats nose along the Omaha grid and take soundings against the plotted positions. A Phoenix has dropped unevenly and must be abandoned. Several Bombardons are missing altogether. Whale spans lie twisted like ladders in a wrecked barn. The numbers tell the truth first. Tonnage per tide at Omaha falls to a fraction. The scheduled throughput cannot be met with piers in this state. Beachmasters, Seabees, and Engineer Special Brigade officers meet in a tent that snaps and booms like a drum. The answer is not sentiment. The answer is method that does not depend on what the sea just showed it can take away. June 22nd, Admiral Alan Goodrich Kirk and Lieutenant General Omar Nelson Bradley accept the arithmetic. Mulberry A at Omaha will be written off, the blockship lee will remain, and the pieces that can be saved will be saved. But the harbour as a linked system of Phoenix, Whale Beetle and Spud will not be rebuilt in place. The beach itself will be the port. Landing ship tank will dry out on falling tides and unload across their own ramps. Rhino ferries built from Navy pontoon gear and outboard power units will shuttle cargo. Causeways will be doubled and tripled. Surf handling will be doctrine. Work details are posted before the meeting breaks. Onshore dozers with tall exhaust stacks carve fresh exits above the high water line. Quartermaster truck companies stage in deeper assembly areas to keep the surf zone clear. Ammunition dumps move inland by measured distances to reduce loss if a salvo finds the beach. Naval Beach Battalion signalmen repaint panel codes for new rendezvous points that do not depend on pierhead availability. The traffic plan becomes a living thing bending with each tide. In the roadstead, tugs prowl and bring the salvageable whale sections alongside, marking the ones that can be repurposed for short-span causeways and scrapping the rest where they lie. Farther east, Arromanches becomes the throat through which heavy flow continues. British and Canadian parties stabilise the surviving breakwaters and roadways, then drive the daily lifts higher again. Several thousand tons per day begin to move reliably across the British harbour as weather allows. Combined with the open beaches, the overall lift rises back toward the invasion plan's targets. There is no triumphal line to mark the change. There is a schedule that closes the gap, a ledger that turns from red back to black. The German premise that no deep-water port meant collapse has not survived the Channel's worst test. The sea has smashed a design, and the invasion has absorbed the blow and shifted technique. The dead ships of the Gooseberry still knock the tops off the swell. The rest is muscle timing and the controlled violence of vehicles against sand at each tide. In the distance, black smoke marks a fight that belongs to another map square. On the beach, men in drenched greens pass a crate down a line one step at a time until it is where it needs to be. June 23, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. The wind has eased, but the swell still runs long. In the grey dawn, a line of landing ship tank approaches, slow and deliberate skippers, counting wave sets and timing the turn. Beachmasters in cork life jackets pace the waterline with signal paddles raised, reading the surf like a map. At the top of the tide, one hull eases in until her keel kisses sand. Engines go astern to settle her square. Ramps thump down. Chains lift. This is the new routine. Dry out, unload, refloat on the next flood. Navy pontoon shops have turned into factories. Rhino ferries built from steel pontoon cubes and outboard power units idle in the lee of the blockship line. Crews in kapok jackets work engine controls with mittened hands, noses white with dried salt. A Rhino, edges alongside a cargo ship, takes aboard crates of 105mm shells, 5-gallon fuel cans, ration boxes, and spare track blocks for tanks. The ferry shudders under the load, bows out, and grinds toward the beach through a field of broken spray. In the surf zone, seabees in lifebelts wade to their waists to catch mooring lines and walk the ferry into place panel by panel. Onshore, the 1st Engineer Special Brigade and the 5th Engineer Special Brigade have turned the sand into a diagram. New exit lanes climb the bluff line where bulldozers cut switchbacks and graders smooth surfaces. Military police hold traffic at points marked by white panels and numbers that speak to coxswains at sea. Quartermaster truck companies back 2 1/2-ton cargo trucks down pontoon causeways that flex under the tires and then pull away loaded engines, coughing exhaust stacks clattering. Ammunition dumps creep inland by measured distances separated by earth berms and netting. Petroleum oil and lubricants sit in bladder tanks behind sand revetments. The tide schedule is written on a chalkboard in block letters. Every minute has a task. The British harbour at Arromanches keeps its rhythm. Royal Engineers jack spud legs to adjust for tide swap. Damaged Beetle floats from under whale spans and lay fresh lines across Bombardon moorings. Landing ship tank nudge to pierheads under the hands of Royal Navy pilots. Ramps drop and trains of Bedford and Austin trucks take cargo forward. At Gold and Juno and Sword, the same pattern holds. The artificial works are bruised but functional. The flow of several thousand tons per day runs across Mulberry B and onto roads that climb out past stone farm walls and hedgerows toward Bayeux and beyond. June 26th to the north. The last German positions inside Cherbourg crack. Lieutenant General J. Lawton Collins and the 7th Corps take the city after a hard street fight and a ring of fortresses that had to be reduced one by one. General Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben surrenders. Rear Admiral Walter Hennecker had overseen demolition of harbour works and scuttling of ships. Piers are blasted, lock gates destroyed, channels mined and choked. The capture matters, but the port will not give capacity for weeks. The beaches must carry the load. At Omaha, destroyers such as USS Doyle and USS Emmons loiter close enough to smell the surf and rake suspected mortar nests with 5-inch 38 caliber fire when shells begin to bracket the roadstead. In the air, Royal Air Force fighters and United States Army Air Forces patrols keep the sky clean. Luftwaffe appearances are brief and high. The main contest is still with the sea. Beach parties double the anchors on pontoon causeways and reset catenaries on moorings. Salvage crews mark twisted whale spans for repurposing as short causeways and cut the rest into scrap where they lie. Tonnage rises again day by day. A landing ship tank that grounds true can put off tanks, bulldozers and trucks in a single tide. A Rhino ferry can shuttle loads that once waited for a pierhead slot. DUKWs run a constant pattern from coaster to beach and inland to dumps green hulls. vanishing into drawers and reappearing empty. A line of Sherman medium tanks from an armoured battalion idles nose to tail on a firm strip above the high water mark, crews checking final drives and radios, while ordnance men fit fresh 105mm high explosive rounds into crates. Behind them, a line of ambulances waits for the next lift of litter cases bound seaward. The German premise that a landing without a deep water port would strangle was a staff line written on a board far from this surf. Colonel General Friedrich Dollmann's 7th Army built obstacle fields, sighted machine guns and anti-tank guns, and prepared pre-sighted mortar zones to hold the perimeter at the waterline. Now the perimeter is behind the bluffs and moving west. The script is breaking not in a single dramatic moment, but in a ledger that records cargo landed per tide and vehicles passed per hour. Procedure over theatre. The numbers decide. June 28th, the weather steadies. The Gooseberry line at Omaha still knocks the tops off the swell and gives boats a chance to pass a line by hand. A Liberty ship hulk that had settled awkwardly shifts with a groan and then holds, workboats snug storm lines. Signalmen on the beach raise panel codes to call the next wave of landing ship tank in by sequence. A chaplain corps officer stands by the litter teams as another small boat pushes off for the transport's faces grey and intent in the bow as the wake fans out behind them. By month's end, a pattern has set like concrete. Open beaches serve as port, lanes dumps and schedules beat like a metronome. Arromanches takes heavy loads across its intact spans. Omaha handles heavy lifts, with rhinos causeways, dry-out drills, and crews that have learned how to read the water by feel. Inland traffic control parties turn convoys north toward Carenton and west toward the Cotentin Neck. Every crate, every jerrycan, every track block moves forward by the same cold arithmetic. On the bluffs, the busted assumptions of a staff plan lie under fresh tire marks. July 1st, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. Dawn comes in a flat sheet of grey and a light off-sea breeze. The blockship line stands like a row of tombs, rust streaks running down their flanks. In its lee, the routine has become a drill. Landing ship tank time their approaches to the tide, ease in, take the ground drop ramps, and begin to breathe out cargo. Rhino ferries shuttle from coasters to sand engines, droning decks stacked with ammunition crates, ration boxes, spare road wheels, track blocks and jerrycans. Onshore military police lift paddles and drop them in a rhythm the drivers can feel through the wheel. The beach is a clock. Utah Beach works the same problem to the west. Rear Admiral John L. Hall's force keeps its own tide, book its own panel codes, its own surf habits. The Gooseberry shelter off Utah had ridden out the gale in better trim, and the lanes there run steady. Amphibious trucks nose past grounded landing ship tank load at coasters and surge up the flooded causeways into the low country behind the dunes. Engineers knock down hedgerow shoulders to widen curves and lay corduroy in soft patches so the 2.5-ton trucks do not bog. The two beaches talk to one another over clipped radio nets, swapping advice that only men who work waterline detail would think to pass. At Arromanches, the artificial harbour stretches into the offing like a steel vertebrae. Royal Engineers jack spud, legs a handspan to meet the morning tide swap, a tired Beetle float under a whale roadway, and relash a Bombardon mooring with fresh wire. The pierhead decks thrum under Bedford and Austin trucks that climb off landing ship tank and turn inland. Royal Navy pilots take each new arrival by the elbow rudder throttle line until the ramp thumps down and the procedure clicks into place. The numbers on the board mount by the hour. Several thousand tons per day is not a boast now. It is the floor that the crews expect to clear. July 4th fireworks are elsewhere. On Omaha, a battery of 105mm howitzers from a field artillery battalion comes ashore by the book muzzle covers. Flapping trails chocked crews with their sleeves rolled, primer tins tucked under elbows. Ordnance men walk among the pieces, fingers on sights and shields checking serial tags against a clipboard. The guns are hitched to trucks and taken straight off the beach toward assembly areas that were a map square of German positions 3 weeks ago. Near the waterline, a squad drags netting over stacks of high explosive to break up the shape from the air. The sky has been quiet, but the habit remains. Cherbourg breathes again, but only in short gasps. United States Navy and Army engineer teams survey blasted quays and lock gates under the smell of harbour mud and explosive residue. Demolition charges had torn the heart out of the basins. Scuttled hulls, choke channels. Cranes lie on their sides like dead insects. Pumps cough to life. Divers go over the side. A crane boom lifts inches and swings. The port will matter, but not yet. Until it does, the beaches and Arromanches carry the lift that feeds Fifth Corps, Fifth Corps, and ex-IM's Corps, as they crowd the Cotentin Neck and the Caen front. The sea still has a vote. July 9th brings a fresh blow that throws white combers across the outer anchorage and forces rhino ferries to pick their moments. Beachmasters shorten approach windows and stack traffic outside the surf line where tugs can keep order. When the wind eases, the plan snaps back into motion as if it never paused. A Liberty hulk in the Gooseberry shifts a degree, groans and settles. Men glance up, mark it and return to the line they are hauling. By mid-month, the ledger begins to tilt towards something larger than the waterline. Road nets inside the lodgement thicken with engineer work, culverts replaced, shoulders widened, bends shaved off with explosives and blade work. Petroleum oil and lubricants move from stacked tins toward hose and tank, where ground allows. Ammunition points stagger inland behind low rises, sandbagged and netted, so a single lucky shell cannot lift a day's work into the air. Traffic regulation maps pin to walls of canvas tents, the coloured routes marked in wax pencil toward Carentan-St. Lo, and the bocage that drinks time and fuel like a sump. July 18th. The sky over Caen boils with the opening of the British and Canadian drive that will be remembered for the weight of bombs and the churn of armour on narrow lanes. The pulse that feeds it runs partly through Arromanches. Pierheads thrum, whale roadways shiver under load, and trucks climb for the ridge. The same day at Omaha, a convoy of landing ship tank grounds in sequence a file of blunt bows and scabbed paint. Ramps drop. A Caterpillar bulldozer noses down first to rough the sand. Then Sherman medium tanks cross in single file, turret hatches open, bow guns peering past the guide with the wand who walks backward, voice flat and calm, hand at waist level, palm down. Behind them come ambulances with litter racks and a smell of disinfectant that cuts across diesel and salt. The German command's prediction had lived on blackboards, and in conference rooms no captured deep water port, therefore no sustained invasion. Colonel General Friedrich Dollmann is gone from the map now, and the new names write orders that cannot repair the premise. The beaches became ports in practice. Arromanches became a pier road that walks with the tide. Cherbourg will join the lift when its wounds close. The inland fight will decide when mass becomes momentum, but each step depends on this surf, these ramps, these schedules, this arithmetic. Toward the end of July, reconnaissance units probing west of St. Lo radio back that the hedgerow maze is giving way in places to ground that lets a driver stretch second gear. Staff study air photos, road condition reports, and supply tables that fold fuel, ammunition rations, and engineer stores into a single question: how long can the front run before it must stop to breathe? On the beach, a quartermaster non-commissioned officer counts jerrycans into a truck bed and chalks the number on the tailgate with a thumbnail. The truck grinds up the lane and disappears into the draw. Another takes its place. The ledger turns pages. The breakout is a word that belongs to tomorrow's orders, but its seeds move now in the steady shove of cargo through surf. July 25th, 1944, near St. Lo, Normandy, France. The morning is already hot when the first heavy bombers pass overhead, broad wings dragging shadows across the hedgerow seams. The ground shakes in a measured drumbeat as patterns of 500-pound and 1,000-pound bombs walk a lane through the German front. Dust rolls into the lanes like smoke. United States First Army has marked the line carefully, but some sticks fall short and some go long. The signal to move comes anyway. 7th Corps, under J. Lawton Collins, steps forward into the slit the bombs have cut. Sherman medium tanks grind through breaks blown in the hedgerows by engineer charges and tank dozer blades. Infantry ride the decks until the next field, then drop and fan out, garrons up, voices tight and clipped. Field artillery battalions roll their 105mm howitzers and 155mm guns closer behind them and begin to fire along a schedule that is more like carpentry than drama. The sky drops P-47 thunderbolts with bombs and rockets onto crossroads and tree lines where machine guns chatter back. German units that had made the hedgerows into a maze of kill pockets begin to come apart under weight rather than surprise. Panzer Division, under General der Panzertrupp Fritz Bayerlein, bleeds men and vehicles in place. 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division GVB loses company posts to pressure from two sides at once. On the beaches, the clock that feeds all of it never pauses. Omaha and Utah still breathe cargo in and out with the tide. Arromanches takes load across spud pierheads that ride up and down on jackable legs while whale roadways quiver and hold. The sums from the waterline become fuel and ammunition in the lanes behind the assault brigades. 2.5-ton GMC trucks nose onto the sand load in ranks that look like a warehouse floor and pull off under military police paddles. Drivers check chalk marks on tailgates with gloved fingers and push the accelerator the way a man pushes his luck. The ledger on the beach tent wall ticks forward as if it were a calm day in a port. July 26, the rip in the line widens. The road south of St. Lo carries more traffic than its ditches were meant to see. Engineers shave hedgerow shoulders with explosives and blades to open curves for tracked columns. A battalion of Sherman tanks rumbles through dust that turns sweat into paste. A tank destroyer platoon angles off to watch a side lane where a Panzer IV had been seen yesterday. Infantry pass German foxholes with the smell of explosive and earth still raw in them. Radios crackle with code words that nobody on the beach needs to hear to understand. The gate is opening. To the west, the Coutances Road fills with debris, where German columns have tried to move under daylight and found P-47 seconds instead. Long black scars mark where rockets have walked a line across a convoy. A half-track has burned down to its bogies, tires melted into puddles, a machine gun welded into a shape that will never move. The air is not safe and the ground is becoming worse. 7th Army is under Generaloberst Paul Hauser now. Above him stands Field Marshal Guenther von Kluge, who holds two commands at once that do not make a single firm line when the map moves this fast. July 28th the 7th. Corps pushes past Heberkrevon and toward Coutances, while Exiepp's corps eases pressure elsewhere to keep the hinge from binding. The lanes that begin on the sand now have names scribbled in grease pencil on canvas walls: north route, south route, return route. A quartermaster non-commissioned officer draws his finger along a map and tells a driver that he will hand the truck to a new driver at a relay point and that he will sleep in the cab with his boots on. The driver nods once and finds first gear. The truck joins a file and becomes a piece of arithmetic moving south. By July 30th, the word Arromanches sits at the bottom of a page of orders next to a time and a list of fuel and ammunition scales. Armour edges toward it in columns that breathe in dust and heat. German counter-moves form and falter. When a battery of 88mm guns opens a lane, the answering call reaches a division artillery net, and shells from 105mm and 155mm guns walk an alley down the hedges until the flashes stop. When an armoured car troop meets a knot of infantry with Panzerfausts, the troop leader calls tanks up, and the formation becomes wait again, applied without pause. None of it would run without the surf rhythm that still bangs against dead hulls in the Gooseberry lines and against pontoon causeways that creak and hold. On Omaha, a landing ship tank settles onto sand at the high line, drops its ramp and breathes out a bulldozer, then a pair of Sherman tanks, then a rank of trucks one by one all the way to the tailgate. On Utah, a Rhino ferry shoves off from a coaster with a deck stacked to its rails and puts its square bow through the white of the surf while men on the beach step into the foam to catch the line. At Arromanches, a spud pierhead deck thumps under a Bedford truck that climbs it and vanishes inland, and then under another and another in a line that does not look like combat until you turn and see the aircraft bombing a road on the ridge. July 31st, the crossings near Pontoons open the door that planners had drawn in pencil months before. Tanks and half-tracks run south through a place that is not hedgerow, but open and rolling ground that drinks fuel by the mile and will reward speed if supplies keep touch. The beaches answer with tonnage, and with a pattern that has learned how to bend to weather and still deliver. Cherbourg begins to add small bites of capacity as channels are cleared and cranes move again, but the weight still comes out of surf and onto sand and up the lanes. German headquarters arguments about deep water ports and impossible invasions do not show themselves on this ground except as delay. The plan that said no port, no invasion has lived as long as time and fuel lines allowed. It is failing under trucks that start on the beach under tanks that take fuel from cans stacked 3 high under a sky where a fighter bomber can still find a convoy and turn it into smoke. The breakout is not a single shout. It is a long exhale through a door that has been forced with concrete steel rope schedules and the habit of meeting the surf twice a day and not missing a tide. August 1st, 1944. Normandy, France. The map changes scale. United States First Army divides to form United States Third Army, and columns begin to breathe in miles rather than fields. Behind them, the surf still sets the metronome. Omaha and Utah keep to the tide. Arromanches lifts trucks in regular files off landing ship tank and sends them inland over whale roadways that thrum under load. Cherbourg adds bites of capacity as divers. Clear channels and cranes swing again. But the weight still comes off sand first into lanes that now point south and east. August 7th, the German counterattack near Mortain comes like a closed fist aimed at the hinge of the advance. The sky answers with fighter bombers and artillery that had been stockpiled through weeks of careful lift. Tank destroyers ease into hedged lanes and wait for silhouettes. Field artillery walks barrages along the roads in measured brackets. When the attempt breaks on the ridge trucks that started on the beaches, carry ammunition forward to keep the pressure on a front that is no longer a line so much as a series of collapsing strongpoints. The ledger on the canvas wall at Omaha turns another page. Tonnage per tide vehicles per hour. The numbers hold. Arromanches works through weather that would have shut a single pier in a peacetime port. Royal Engineers jack spud legs, swap Beetle floats and relash Bombardon moorings before first light. Royal Navy pilots take one landing ship tank after another by the elbow, and the decks thump out Bedford and Austin trucks that vanish inland toward the British and Canadian axes north of Caen. On American beaches, rhino ferries grind through white water with decks stacked to their rails, while amphibious trucks run shuttle patterns that an officer could sketch from memory with his eyes closed and get the timing right. Every man on the waterline knows the routine by touch. August 12th to August 21st, the pocket near Falaise tightens under blows from 3 directions. Columns of German vehicles try to run the roads in daylight and meet P-47 Thunderbolts and Typhoons instead. In the gaps, artillery fire from 105mm and 155mm guns writes a lattice across crossroads and field exits. Prisoners move back in long, stunned files, stepping around wreckage that still smokes. The weight for all of it rides a path that begins where surf breaks against dead ships at Gooseberry lines and where a spud pierhead rides the tide and does not stop. August 25th. Paris raises a new flag over old buildings. The lift shifts again away from siege stocks and toward fuel food and spares needed for motion. Truck routes that start on sand get a name: Red Ball Express. 2.5 ton cargo trucks run nose to tail, blacked out over routes kept clear by military police and engineers who widen shoulders, shave bends, and lay corduroy through soft ground. Drivers swap at relay points without shutting engines down. The river crossings at the Seine fill with dust and exhaust as columns pour over. The beaches answer with more jerrycans, more crates, more tires, more track blocks. By the end of August, the German statement that an invasion without a deep water port would strangle is a line that no longer matches anything on the ground. Colonel General Friedrich Dollmann is gone. Field Marshal Guenther von Klug has come and gone. New signatures appear on orders that cannot reverse arithmetic. Arromanches still lifts several thousand tons on a day with fair weather. Omaha and Utah still turn tide into cargo, and cargo into movement. Cherbourg begins to matter more with each cleared berth. The lodgement is not a foothold now, but a platform, and the platform extends because the waterline work did not miss a tide when the gale came. September approaches. The coast behind the invasion beaches grows quieter, the lanes broader, the dumps deeper and better netted. On the water, a Liberty hulk in the Gooseberry at Omaha leans a degree farther and then rests. On the pierhead at Arromanches, a deckhand knots a line by habit and looks past the bow at a horizon that is no longer a deadline but a road. Inland engines cough, clutches take up, and a convoy eases forward into the night. The trucks carry fuel, ammunition rations, and spare parts. They carry the practical end of an argument written months ago on a board with chalk build, shelter build, piers, drive tonnage. The invasion did not wait for a port. It brought one, and then learned to do without it when the sea tore it apart.